The galaxy was wide, filled with countless stars, but not every corner was free. The Galactic Council ruled with strict laws, and all species under its command were forced to obey. Among those species were the alien dragons, a proud and powerful race known for their wings that glowed in the dark sky and for the fire that burned inside them. These dragons were not just animals, they were thinking beings, full of wisdom, but their traditions were older than many suns. The council kept them under control by using their own traditions as chains. One rule stood above all others. The dragons were only allowed to give birth during one sacred season. It was said that this law kept the balance of their kind. If a dragon mother broke it, she was seen as a danger to the galaxy. No matter her reason, the punishment was always the same: exile. Death for the child. A warning to all who dared to step outside the order. Sura was one such dragon. She was not reckless, she was not careless, but her time came earlier than the council's rule allowed. Alone on the cliffs of her home world, she gave birth under a storm. Her body glowed faintly as she curled around the small form of her child. The baby was weak, fragile, its scales not yet strong, but to Sura it was perfect. She loved it from the first breath. She whispered soft sounds in the dragon tongue, telling her little one that she would keep it safe, no matter what. But love could not hide her crime. The council's eyes were everywhere. Drones circled the skies, and watchers reported the event. The law had been broken. The punishment began before dawn. Ships flew across the sky, their lights flashing like cold stars. Voices filled the air, demanding surrender. They did not call her Sura, they called her offender. They did not see her child as life, they saw it as mistake. Her wings shook with anger and fear as she held the small one tighter against her chest. The council's words echoed in her mind. The season was broken. The law must stand, life out of season cannot be allowed. Hunters came with nets that could trap even the strongest dragon. They did not care for her pain. They only cared for order. Sura fought with fire, her breath lighting the night sky, but she was outnumbered. She could not fly far with her child so small. She was forced to flee to a desolate moon at the edge of known space. There she hid in caves where light barely touched the stone walls. Her body ached from wounds, and her wings were torn in places. But still, she shielded the baby with every breath she had. On the moon, silence ruled. No forests, no rivers, only dust and broken rock. The stars above seemed colder there, like eyes that did not care. Sura built a nest of stone and ash. The baby cried with thin sounds that echoed through the cave, and Sura soothed it with her warmth. Each day was a struggle. She hunted small creatures that crawled in the shadows. She drank water that dripped from the cave roof. Every moment was filled with fear that hunters would return to finish their work. She remembered the words of the elders. To give life is joy, but to give it out of season is curse. Sura did not believe this. To her, the child was not curse but gift. Yet she was alone. The galaxy had turned against her. Even her own kind had cast her aside. She thought of the ancient stories of dragons who had once flown free, before the council's chains. Were those stories true? Or were they only dreams? As days passed, her wounds healed slowly, but her spirit grew heavy. She knew the council would not stop. They wanted her dead, and they wanted her child erased from memory. She feared every sound outside the cave. When a stone rolled down the cliff, her heart jumped. When wind whistled through the cracks, she thought it was the sound of hunters. Yet through all this fear, she never let go of the baby. She named it Elio, a small name, easy to speak even when weak. Lio's eyes opened slowly, glowing faintly like two tiny stars. Siro looked into them and felt hope, even when everything around her was despair. Far above the moon, patrol ships crossed the empty sky. Messages passed between them. The dragon still lives. She hides with the child. The law will be carried out. Their voices were like iron, without care, without mercy. To them, it was not a life, it was an error. But they did not know that in the cave, Siro whispered songs to her baby. She promised Lio a future, though she did not know how to give it. She promised that she would fight until her last breath. The galaxy had punished her. The council had marked her as enemy. But in her heart, Siro believed one truth. Giving birth was not crime. Protecting her child was not crime. The council could not see this, but she held it close, like fire hidden in the dark. Each day she lived was a victory, even if small. Each breath Lio took was a light against the cold law of the stars. In the shadows of the cave, Siro waited, not knowing that her path would soon cross with another outcast. A soldier from a far world, a human who would not follow the council's command, was on his way. She did not yet know his name. She did not yet know that fate was moving. But for now, she kept her wings wrapped tight around her child, and she told herself again and again that no law, no council, no galaxy could take away the bond between mother and child. Ron sat in the cockpit of his small patrol ship, staring out at the empty stretch of stars. For weeks he had been on duty at the far edge of human space. It was lonely work. His commanders called it peacekeeping, but to Ron it felt more like exile. Pirates no longer came this far, and raiders had moved to richer routes. All that remained was silence, broken only by the hum of the ship's engines and the soft beeps of the control panel. He was tired. Years of service had carved deep lines on his face. His uniform was worn, the colors fading. He had fought in battles across 3 systems, seen friends fall, and watched colonies burn. Now he was told to guard borders no one cared about. He had thought about leaving the service many times, but he had nowhere else to go. Duty was all he had left. One night, as the ship drifted past a barren star system, a faint signal appeared on his screen. It was weak, almost like a whisper. The computer barely caught it. Ron leaned forward, adjusting the dials. The signal repeated again, broken and rough, but clear enough to know it was not natural. Someone was out there, sending a call for help. He frowned. This sector was supposed to be empty. No colonies, no stations, no trade routes. His training told him to ignore it. Signals like this often came from old wrecks or false beacons. Besides, his orders were clear. He was not to interfere with matters outside human space, especially if they involved the Galactic Council. Interference could mean punishment for him too. But something in the sound made him pause. It was not just a machine echo. It was desperate, alive. He thought of the times he had sent calls for help in battle, his voice lost in the chaos, praying someone would hear. He remembered the silence that answered too often. His hand hovered over the control to turn the signal off, but he could not press it. He whispered to himself, if I leave it, they die. If I go, maybe I break orders. But which one can I live with? His decision came quickly. He turned his ship toward the source. The engines roared softly as he set a course to the barren moon where the signal pointed. His commanders would not know, at least not yet. And if they did, he was ready to face the cost. He told himself that no law, no command, should stop him from answering a cry for help. The journey took hours. The moon slowly grew larger in his window, gray and lifeless. It was covered in craters, with sharp cliffs and long shadows. His scanners showed no settlements, no bases, only a few traces of energy near the surface. That meant someone was hiding, or someone was hurt. Ron guided the ship down carefully, landing on a flat stretch of rock near the cliffs. Dust rose as the ship touched down, covering the view for a moment. He strapped on his gear, checked his weapon, and lowered the ramp. Cold air rushed in, sharp and thin. He stepped out, his boots crunching on stone. Silence filled the air, heavy and endless. At first, he saw nothing but rock and dust. Then he noticed marks on the ground. Burn marks. Long black scars across the stone, as if fire had swept through. He knelt and touched one. The edges were sharp, recent. Not natural. Something powerful had fought here. His eyes narrowed. He followed the marks, moving toward the cliffs. As he climbed, he saw broken metal scattered across the ground. Pieces of drones, smashed and torn. Some still sparked faintly. They were council design, he recognized the shape. His chest tightened. That meant this place was not just an accident. The council had been here. If they were involved, the signal he heard was not simple distress. It was something far more dangerous. At the top of the cliff, he found a wide cave mouth. Dark, silent, but with faint traces of heat coming from inside. He raised his weapon, ready for trouble. Yet something in him said to wait. He lowered the weapon slowly and stepped forward, his eyes adjusting to the dark. Inside, the cave walls glowed faintly with leftover heat. In the center, he saw her. A creature larger than any beast he had ever faced, wings folded, scales shining like dull silver, eyes glowing in the dim light. It was a dragon, but not like the ones from Earth's old stories. This one was alien, majestic, and broken at the same time. Her body showed wounds, scars from nets and blades. Her breathing was heavy, but steady. And at her chest, wrapped in her wings, lay a small shape. A child. Another dragon, tiny, weak, but alive. Ron froze. His training told him to retreat. The council had made rules about this species. He knew their orders: dragons were dangerous, dragons were not to be touched, especially not those born out of season. Yet standing there, looking at the mother's tired eyes and the small creature she shielded, he felt something stronger than orders. He felt pity. He felt respect. He felt anger at the cruelty that had driven her here. The dragon mother saw him. Her eyes narrowed, glowing brighter. She let out a low growl, her body tense. Flames flickered at the edges of her mouth. She thought he was another hunter. Ron lifted his weapon slowly, then dropped it to the ground. He raised his hands, showing he meant no harm. His voice was calm as he spoke. "I am not your enemy. I heard your call. I came to help." The words echoed in the cave. The dragon's growl softened, though her body stayed tense. She did not trust him, not yet. But she did not attack either. Her gaze stayed locked on him, weighing his soul. The small child stirred, making a soft sound, and she bent down to soothe it with her nose. Ron's heart tightened at the sight. He understood now. This was not a weapon, not a monster, but a mother fighting to protect her child. He stepped closer, slow and careful, never breaking eye contact. The dragon watched every move. He knew trust would not come in one moment, but he was ready to wait. For the first time in years, Ron felt alive. Not because of battle, not because of orders, but because he had found something worth protecting. He did not yet know her name. He did not yet know the story of her exile. But he knew one thing clearly. He would not leave her here to die. The cave was silent except for the faint crackle of heat rising from the dragon's wounded body. Ron stood just inside the entrance, his boots on the stone floor, his weapon lying far behind him. He kept his hands raised to show he was no threat. The great silver dragon watched him without blinking. Her eyes glowed in the shadows, like two lanterns that held both fire and suspicion. Ron's heart beat fast. He had faced raiders, pirates, even alien mercenaries, but this was different. The creature before him was larger than any war machine. Her wings, folded tightly, stretched wide across the cave. Sharp claws dug into the ground, ready to strike. One breath from her throat could burn him where he stood. Yet he did not step back. Something inside told him to stay. The small child stirred under her mother's wing. The baby dragon made a soft sound, thin but alive. Its tiny head lifted for a moment, showing scales that shimmered faintly like dim stars. The mother lowered her neck to shield it, then raised her gaze again toward Ron. A low rumble left her throat, warning him not to come closer. Ron spoke slowly, his voice steady. "I will not harm you. I came because I heard your call." He pointed softly at his ear, then at the sky above. "Signal." "I followed it here." The dragon tilted her head, as if trying to understand. Her kind did not use human words, but they understood tone, gesture, and intent. Ron's calm voice and lowered hands told her more than any translator could. Still, her eyes remained sharp, watching every move. Ron took a slow breath. He needed to show he meant no harm, but also that he could be trusted. He reached to his belt, pulled out a small pouch of medical supplies, and set it gently on the stone. He did not step closer. He only placed it down and then moved back, leaving the kid where she could reach it. The dragon's gaze shifted to the pouch. She sniffed the air, sensing no trap, only strange herbs and tools. With slow movement, she stretched one claw and pulled the pouch closer. Her eyes returned to Ron, testing his reaction. He stayed still. Minutes passed in silence. Finally, the dragon bent her neck and licked one of her wounds. The injury was deep, burned by council weapons. She winced but did not stop. Ron spoke again, his voice calm. "I can help with that. Medicine. Healing." He pointed at the wound, then at himself, then at the pouch. The dragon's eyes narrowed. She did not move for a long time. Then, with surprising gentleness, she shifted her wing aside just enough to reveal the wound along her shoulder. It was not surrender, but it was not rejection either. It was a test. Ron stepped forward slowly, each step heavy with care. When he reached the pouch, he knelt and opened it. He pulled out a small spray bottle of antiseptic and some bandages. He spoke softly as he worked, though he knew she might not understand the words. "This will sting, but it will clean. It will help you heal." The dragon tensed as he sprayed the wound. Her claws scraped the ground, but she did not strike. The antiseptic hissed on her scales, smoke rising as it killed the infection. Ron worked quickly but carefully, pressing a bandage across the wound and tying it with firm hands. When he was done, he stepped back and bowed his head, showing respect. The dragon studied him, her breath heavy. Then she lowered her head slightly, just enough to show she accepted his act. It was not trust, not yet, but it was the first step. The baby dragon stirred again, letting out a tiny cry. Ron's eyes softened. He looked at the child, then at the mother. "Your child is strong," he said gently. "I will help you protect it." His voice carried no command, only promise. The mother tilted her head, listening to his tone. She did not know the human's words, but she understood his intent. She drew her wings tighter around the child, but her gaze on Ron softened slightly. Night fell outside the cave. The stars shone cold through the mouth of the cliff. Ron sat by the entrance, keeping watch. He did not dare sleep. He knew the council's hunters might return at any time. He cleaned his weapon, though he hoped he would not need it. Behind him, the dragon lay curled around her child, her glowing eyes half closed but never fully resting. As the hours passed, Ron thought about his life. He had spent years fighting wars that never ended. He had followed orders that felt hollow. Yet here, with one wounded mother and her small child, he felt more purpose than he had ever known. Protecting them was not duty forced upon him. It was choice. Near dawn, the child crawled a little from under its mother's wing. Its eyes glowed faintly blue, soft and curious. Ron watched in silence as it looked at him. The baby did not fear him. It blinked, tilted its head, and let out a small chirp, like a bird. The sound made Ron smile for the first time in years. The mother lifted her head sharply, pulling the child back under her wing. Her eyes locked on Ron again, warning him. But Ron only bowed his head in respect, showing he would not reach for the child. Slowly, the mother eased again. When the first light of the nearby star touched the cave, Ron knew his decision was sealed. He would not leave this place. The council might come. His commanders might call him traitor. But he could not walk away from them. He would stand by the dragon and her child. Inside the cave, the bond was not yet formed, but the roots of it had begun. A soldier who had nothing left had found a reason to fight again. A mother who trusted no one had allowed a stranger to treat her wounds. And a child, small and fragile, had opened its eyes to see both of them. None of them knew what the days ahead would bring. But all three felt the first spark of something greater than fear. The galaxy had cast the dragon aside, but in the quiet of the cave, hope had begun to grow. Morning light touched the mouth of the cave, but inside the shadows remained cool and quiet. Ron sat near the entrance, cleaning the dust from his rifle, though he kept it lowered. He glanced back often, watching the dragon mother and her child. The mother's wounds still glowed faintly from the medicine, but her breathing had steadied. The small one slept curled against her chest, its tiny wings folded tight. For hours neither side moved much. Ron did not wish to disturb them, and the dragon still tested his presence with sharp eyes. Yet as time passed, the silence changed. It no longer felt like tension, but like uneasy peace. Both sides waited to see who would break it first. Finally, hunger forced a change. The baby stirred, chirping with a thin cry. The mother lifted her head and looked toward the entrance. Outside the cave, small creatures crawled among the rocks. They were weak prey, hardly enough for a full-grown dragon, but they would fill the stomach of a child. Ron noticed her gaze. He understood her need. Rising slowly, he lifted a small net launcher from his belt. The mother growled at the sight of the device, her body tense, but Ron spoke calmly. "Food. For the little one." He pointed at the baby, then at the creatures outside. His gestures told the meaning. The dragon watched him carefully but allowed him to step outside. Ron moved across the rocks, silent and patient. He aimed the net at a crawling beast and fired. The net wrapped around the creature, trapping it. With steady steps, he returned to the cave and placed the prey on the ground before the mother. He did not keep it for himself. The mother lowered her head, sniffed the catch, and then pushed it gently toward the child. The small dragon chirped again and clumsily bit into the creature. Its teeth were tiny, but hunger gave it strength. Ron watched with quiet pride. He had hunted for many in his life: soldiers, survivors, strangers, but never had a simple act felt so meaningful. The mother's gaze returned to him. Her eyes still held caution, but now there was something else as well. Respect. She saw that the human had provided for her child without asking anything in return. It was a small step, but a step toward trust. Days passed this way. Ron stayed near the cave, never leaving them alone for long. Each morning he hunted, bringing small creatures for the child. Each night he cleaned the mother's wounds with his supplies. Slowly the gashes closed, her silver scales knitting together. She no longer flinched when he touched her shoulder with the bandage. In the evenings, when the stars stretched across the sky, Ron would speak. He told stories, not to teach, but to fill the silence. His voice echoed softly against the stone walls. He spoke of Earth, of green forests and blue oceans. He spoke of cities filled with lights, of rains that washed the streets, of mountains that touched the clouds. The dragon mother listened, her head tilted slightly. She could not understand every word, but she understood tone, rhythm, and feeling. The warmth in his voice carried meaning beyond language. The child, too, listened. Sometimes its glowing eyes stayed fixed on Ron as if it could see the pictures in his mind. One night, as the fire from a small lamp glowed in the cave, Ron told a different story. He spoke of war, of friends who had fallen. His voice grew heavy, but he did not stop. He told of how he had lost people he cared about, how silence had followed, how he had felt alone even among his own kind. His hands trembled slightly as he spoke. The dragon mother's eyes softened. For the first time, she lowered her head close to him. Her breath warmed the air near his face. She did not speak, but the gesture carried meaning. She knew pain. She knew exile. She knew what it was to be left alone by the galaxy. In that moment, the gap between them closed a little more. The child crawled closer too, curious about the human's quiet voice. It chirped and brushed its small wing against Ron's boot. Ron froze, then smiled. Slowly, carefully, he reached down and touched the child's back with 2 fingers. The scales were smooth and warm. The child chirped again, louder this time, and the mother did not pull it away. That was the first real sign of trust. From that day, the bond grew stronger. Ron became more than visitor. He became protector. He stood guard at the cave entrance when shadows moved outside. He carried water from deep cracks in the rocks. He built small fires for warmth during the cold nights. The mother, in return, allowed him closer each time. She no longer growled when he stepped near. Sometimes she even lowered her head beside him, resting as he kept watch. The child grew stronger, walking a few steps each day, its wings stretching wider. Ron often laughed softly at its clumsy falls, though the sound of laughter felt strange on his lips after so many years. Yet beneath the bond, danger remained. High above the barren moon, Council patrols still surged. Their ships scanned the surface, their message is cold. The dragon must not survive. The child must not grow. The law will be kept. Ron knew it was only a matter of time before they returned. He saw the scars in the rock, the broken drones, the burn marks. They would not stop until the mother and child were destroyed. But each day he spent with them, his resolve hardened. He would not allow it. One evening, as the sun of the system dipped low, Ron looked at the mother and spoke firmly. "I will protect you. Both of you." His words were simple, but his voice carried weight. The mother's eyes met his. She lowered her head again, closer this time, and touched his shoulder with the tip of her snout. It was not just respect. It was acceptance. The child chirped between them, climbing onto its mother's foreleg and flapping its tiny wings. The sight made Ron smile again. In that small moment, in that dark cave, he no longer felt like a soldier lost in endless wars. He felt like guardian of something greater. The galaxy outside wanted to punish life, but inside this cave, life had found new meaning. A human soldier, a dragon mother, and a fragile child were no longer strangers. They were becoming something more. The bond between human and dragon grew stronger with each passing day. Ron no longer felt like an outsider when he stepped into the cave. The dragon mother allowed him to sit close, and the child often climbed onto his lap, its wings flapping clumsily as it tried to mimic flight. At night, when the stars filled the sky, Ron told stories of Earth, while the mother listened with calm eyes. But peace never lasts long in a galaxy ruled by cold laws. Far above the barren moon, council ships returned. They moved like shadows, silent but sharp. Drones spread out across the orbit, scanning for signs of life. One by one, they locked onto the faint heat inside the cave. The council's voices spoke across the channels. The exile lives. The child lives. The law must stand. Hunters, prepare. On the moon's surface, Ron felt the first warning. His ship's scanner beeped faintly, catching a signal he knew too well. Enemy patrols. His heart tightened. He stood quickly and looked toward the sky. Thin lines of light glimmered far above. They were coming. Ron hurried into the cave. The dragon mother lifted her head, sensing his urgency. Her eyes narrowed. The child tilted its head, not yet understanding the danger. Ron spoke quickly, his voice firm. "Hunters are here. They will try again. We must be ready." The mother gave a low growl, fire glowing faintly between her teeth. She already knew what it meant. She had fought them once, and she had nearly lost her life. But now she was not alone. Ron checked his weapons. He had his rifle, a few grenades, and a small supply of energy packs. It was not much against a full squad of hunters, but he had no choice. He had chosen this path the moment he stepped into the cave. He would not turn back. The mother spread her wings wide inside the cave. The light of her scales reflected against the walls. She roared, not in fear but in defiance. The sound shook the ground. The child chirped loudly too, as if joining its mother's cry. Ron felt a surge of courage. This was not just a fight for survival. It was a fight for life itself. Soon the first hunter ship broke through the clouds. Its engines screamed across the sky, and its metal body shone with the mark of the council. Drones poured out like black insects, their wings buzzing, their weapons glowing red. They flew in formation, circling the cave entrance. Loudspeakers crackled with cold words. "Exile dragon, surrender the child. The law demands it. Refuse and face destruction." Ron stepped out of the cave, his rifle raised. He shouted back, his voice echoing across the cliffs. This child is not a crime. This mother is not your enemy. Leave now, or you will find resistance. The hunters laughed through the speakers. Human soldier, you have no place here. This is not your war. Stand aside, or be crushed with them. Ron's jaw tightened. He aimed his rifle and fired at the nearest drone. The blast struck true, and the drone exploded in sparks. His answer was clear. He would not step aside. The mother burst from the cave with a roar that shook the sky. Her wings spread wide, silver flames lighting the air. Fire poured from her mouth, striking the swarm of drones. Half of them fell at once, their metal bodies melting. The hunters had expected a weak exile, not a dragon fighting beside a human soldier. The battle spread across the cliffs. Ron moved with steady aim, his shots precise, taking down drones one after another. He used the rocks for cover, rolling and firing with a soldier's skill. The mother fought above him, her wings cutting the air, her flames burning paths through the enemy. The child stayed hidden deep in the cave, but its cries echoed like a heartbeat. That sound gave both Ron and the mother strength. They were not fighting for pride or for law. They were fighting for the future of the small life waiting in the shadows. The hunters sent ground troops, armored soldiers with energy rifles. They marched across the rocks in formation, firing beams that cut through stone. Ron threw grenades, blasting them back. The mother swooped low, her claws striking the ground and shattering their lines. Smoke and fire filled the air. But the hunters were many. More ships came, more drones swarmed. Ron's rifle grew hot in his hands, his ammo running low. Sweat dripped down his face as he reloaded quickly. He glanced at the mother. Her scales were scorched, her wings bleeding from cuts, but her eyes still burned with fire. Hold on, Ron muttered through clenched teeth. We can drive them back. The hunters shouted again through their speakers. You cannot win. The council's law is eternal. The child must not live. Ron's anger flared. He shouted back with all his strength. The law is not life. The law is not justice. This child has the right to live. His voice carried across the battlefield, not just to the hunters, but to the sky itself. With renewed fury, he charged forward, blasting another wave of drones. The mother unleashed a storm of fire, brighter and hotter than before. The hunters faltered under the sudden force. They had expected fear, but what they found was resistance stronger than their numbers. At last, one of the larger ships fell, its engines struck by the dragon's flame. It crashed against the rocks, exploding in light. The other ships pulled back, their drones retreating. The hunters, beaten and shaken, retreated into the sky. Their voices cracked with anger. This is not the end. The council will not forgive. We will return. Silence fell after the last ship disappeared into the clouds. The battlefield was covered in smoke and broken metal. Ron lowered his rifle, his chest heaving. His body ached, his ammo nearly gone, but his spirit stood tall. The mother landed beside him, her wings folding slowly. She lowered her head, touching his shoulder with her snout. It was not just thanks. It was recognition. He was not only protector now. He was partner in battle. From the cave, the child crawled out, chirping loudly. It flapped its tiny wings, as if celebrating their survival. Ron smiled, tired but proud. He knelt and placed his hand gently on the child's back. You're safe. We kept you safe. The mother looked toward the stars, her eyes burning with both pride and worry. She knew the hunters would return. She knew the council would not stop. But now she also knew she was not alone. With the human soldier by her side, she had more than just hope. She had strength. The barren moon lay quiet for only a few hours. Ron and the dragon mother, Sara, knew the calm would not last. The council's forces would return, stronger this time. Ron checked his rifle, counting the rounds. His heart beat fast, but his mind was clear. Every move had to be precise. Every decision mattered. The child, Lio, was growing stronger, but it was still too small to defend itself. Sara moved beside him, her scales gleaming silver in the dim light. Her wings flexed slowly, preparing for flight if needed. She had healed more, but her body still bore the scars of the last attack. Her eyes, though tired, were sharp and full of determination. She roared softly, letting the sound carry across the cliffs as a warning. Ron understood the language of that roar better than anyone else. It said, "We will not fall. We will fight." From above, faint lights appeared. The first wave of ships glimmered against the starry sky. Their engines hummed like cold wind. Ron adjusted his aim and scanned the horizon. The drones came first, black and silent, moving in perfect formation. They were many, far more than he could face alone. But he was not alone. Sara lifted off the ground. Her wings cut the air with grace, lifting her body higher and higher. Flames began to glow at the corners of her mouth, heating the air. She hovered above the rocks, ready to strike. Ron fired at the nearest drone, hitting it with precision. Sparks flew as it crashed against the cliff. One by one, the drones fell, but more came in endless waves. The hunters below landed with heavy steps. Armored figures in council uniforms spread across the rocks, energy rifles ready. Their weapons glowed bright red. They moved with discipline, confident that they would crush the human and dragon together. Ron ducked behind a boulder, firing at each enemy that moved. He aimed carefully, each shot calculated. He knew the difference between life and death for every second. Sara dove, her claws striking a group of drones on the ground. Fire burst from her mouth, melting their weapons. She swooped higher, then dived again, her wings beating the air like storms. Sparks and flames filled the battlefield. The sound of battle echoed across the cliffs, shaking stones loose from the rocks. Ron threw grenades with skill, taking out more drones. He moved quickly, keeping low, guiding Sara's attacks by positioning himself to draw the enemies into the open. He felt the heat of her flames behind him, but he did not fear. They fought as a team, human and dragon, each action supporting the other. Lio watched from inside the cave at first, its small wings trembling. Then it chirped loudly, as if calling to its mother. Sara dove closer to the cave, letting the sound guide her attack. The child was more than a reason to fight. It was a symbol of hope, and both Ron and Sara fought harder because of it. The hunters sent a second wave, larger and more organized. They moved quickly, forming a circle around the cliffside. Ron fired as fast as he could, but he was running low on ammo. He yelled at Sara, signaling her to create a diversion. She understood instantly. Her wings stretched wide, and she rose high, then released a storm of fire at the ships above. The heat forced the pilots to break formation, and some ships crashed against rocks. The hunters below hesitated, unsure how to respond. Ron seized the moment, charging toward them with courage. He dodged energy beams and returned fire, each shot precise. He used rocks for cover and movement, leading the hunters into traps where Sura could strike. The teamwork was seamless. Human skill met alien power, and neither force could break the other. Sura landed among the hunters, her claws sharp as blades. She struck the ground, sending several armored soldiers flying. Flames licked their weapons, melting them into useless metal. Her wings cut through the air, scattering drones like paper. Her roar echoed across the cliffs, warning the council that this exile was no longer weak. The battle raged for hours. Smoke and fire filled the air. Rocks shattered under explosions. Ron's hands ached from firing, his breath came in short bursts, but his mind stayed sharp. Every step he took, every shot he fired, was for Lio, for the child who depended on them. He refused to falter. Finally, the largest council ship above the cliffs descended. It fired a beam that tore across the battlefield. Sura dove straight at it, her fire meeting the energy beam head-on. Sparks and flames erupted in the sky. Ron took aim at the ship's engines and fired his last energy pack. The explosion rocked the ship. It spun out of control and crashed into the rocks, scattering drones and soldiers alike. The remaining forces hesitated, looking at the destruction of their leader. Their morale broke. The hunters fled into the sky, leaving behind broken machines and wounded soldiers. Silence fell once more over the cliffs. Smoke rose from the battlefield, but the humans and dragons had survived. Ron lowered his rifle, exhausted but alive. His chest heaved with relief and pride. He looked at Sura, who had landed beside him, wings folded but still alert. Her scales were scorched, some bleeding, but her eyes burned with victory. She lowered her head and touched his shoulder, a gesture of gratitude and respect. From the cave, Lio emerged, chirping and flapping its tiny wings. It climbed onto Ron's leg and then onto Sura's back, safe and unharmed. The child's eyes glowed brighter than ever, full of life and hope. Ron smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest he had not felt in years. This small creature, born into exile, had survived because of courage, teamwork, and care. Sura looked to the stars. She knew the council would not stop. They would return one day, stronger and more determined. But now she was not afraid. With Ron by her side, she had more than just strength. She had strategy, courage, and someone who understood her. Together, they were more than the hunters could overcome. Ron knelt beside the child, letting it climb onto his shoulders. He whispered softly, "You are safe now. We fought for you, and we will keep fighting if we must." His eyes met Sura's, and they shared a silent understanding. They were not just allies. They were partners. Guardians of life against the cruelty of the galaxy. The battlefield lay quiet, broken only by the crackle of smoldering rocks. Flames died slowly, leaving a faint glow on the cliffs. Ron looked up at the stars. The galaxy was still vast, still harsh, still full of laws meant to punish. But for the first time, he saw hope. Life, courage, and trust had survived here. Against impossible odds, they had won. And in that quiet moment, human and dragon, mother and child, knew one thing clearly: no law, no punishment, no galaxy could take away the bond they had formed. Together, they were unstoppable. The smoke cleared slowly from the cliffs, leaving the ground scarred but quiet. Ron stood beside Sura, the dragon mother, and watched as the last remnants of the council's hunters retreated into the sky. His body ached from the long battle, but his heart felt lighter than it had in years. They had survived. They had protected Lio, the small dragon, and that was all that mattered. Sura lowered her wings slowly, allowing herself to rest. Her body was still marked with cuts and scorch marks, but she moved with calm strength. Lio chirped softly, climbing onto her back, then looking at Ron with bright, glowing eyes. The child was small, fragile, yet full of life. Ron knelt beside them, smiling gently. He reached out and brushed his hand over Lio's scales. They were warm and soft, filled with energy. "This is your home now," Ron whispered. "We will keep it safe." The dragon mother tilted her head, understanding his words in her own way. She had fought alone, hiding from a galaxy that wanted her erased. But now, with Ron by her side, she felt something she had not felt in years: trust. Not blind trust, but the kind that grew slowly, earned through care, protection, and shared struggle. Days passed on the barren moon, each one a mixture of survival and quiet healing. Ron scavenged what supplies he could find from the remains of the battle, repairing his small ship and building simple shelters for warmth. Sura hunted small creatures across the rocky cliffs, bringing food for Lio. Each day the child grew stronger, walking a little farther, trying to flap its wings higher, chirping loudly as if to announce its presence to the stars. Ron taught Lio in small ways. He would show it how to crouch low, how to watch the sky, and how to sense danger. The child struggled at first, tripping over its own tiny legs, but it learned quickly. Sura watched with pride, circling above when Lio practiced flying. Each day brought small victories, and each victory filled the cave with laughter, chirps, and soft roars. At night, Ron and Sura would sit together at the edge of the cliffs, looking at the galaxy beyond. The stars stretched endlessly, cold and distant, yet full of possibilities. Ron spoke softly, telling stories of planets with oceans, mountains, and forests. He described cities glowing with lights, people working and living, music and art. Sura listened quietly, imagining a world she had never seen, a world beyond the Council's laws. "It is beautiful," Sura whispered one night, her voice low and thoughtful, though Ron could not understand the exact words. The tone carried meaning, a quiet longing for freedom and peace. Ron nodded. "It can be," he said. "One day, you and Lio could see it too." The child chirped, stretching its tiny wings in the moonlight. It was growing faster each day, stronger and more confident. Ron and Sura realized that survival was no longer enough. They needed a future. A life beyond hiding, beyond battle. Together, they began to plan. Ron explored the cliffs further, finding a hidden valley not visible from the sky. It was filled with small pools of water, safe caves, and patches of vegetation where small animals lived. It was perfect for Lio to grow without constant fear. He showed Sura the valley, and she nodded, understanding immediately. It would be their sanctuary, a place to teach the child how to live without hiding, a place to grow strong. Weeks turned into months. The scars of the battle healed, and the moon that once seemed desolate became a home. Lio learned to fly short distances, flapping its wings with determination, while Sura encouraged it, guiding it through the air. Ron watched every attempt, ready to catch the child if it fell, always patient and supportive. The bond between human and dragon grew unbreakable. They shared tasks, defended each other without hesitation, and found comfort in each other's presence. Ron had found purpose beyond orders, beyond duty. He was no longer just a soldier, he was guardian, teacher, and friend. Sura had found trust again, something she had thought lost forever. And Lio, the child born out of season, thrived under their care, learning courage, wisdom, and freedom. One evening, as the sun of the system set behind the cliffs, Ron stood at the edge of the valley, looking out at the stars. He felt a quiet sense of hope. The Council's forces could return, but now they were not alone, and the cliffs would be defended fiercely. Cyril landed beside him, touching him gently with her snout, a sign of shared determination. Lio flew above them, testing the evening air, chirping proudly. "This is just the beginning," Ron said softly. "We will survive. We will thrive. And one day, maybe, we will show the galaxy that life is stronger than law, stronger than fear." Cyril lowered her wings in agreement, the glow of her scales softening in the moonlight. Lio chirped again, diving toward the valley, then rising into the sky with growing skill. Ron smiled, feeling warmth in his chest. For the first time in years, he felt hope, a future full of possibilities. The galaxy was vast and harsh, but it could not erase what they had built. They had survived punishment, battle, and exile. Together, human and dragon had forged a bond that could not be broken. Life, courage, and trust had won over cruelty and law. From the cliffs, they watched the stars stretch endlessly across the sky. The Council might still judge, might still send hunters, but the mother, the child, and the human soldier had discovered something greater than fear. They had discovered freedom, hope, and the power of choice. And in that quiet valley, on a moon once empty and barren, the three of them began their new life. One of survival, yes, but also of love, courage, and discovery. Together, they would face the galaxy, not as victims, not as exiles, but as guardians of life and hope. Above, Lio flapped its wings higher, trying to reach the stars. Cyril soared beside it, guiding it with strength and care. Ron followed, running across the cliffs, feeling the wind, feeling alive. For the first time, they knew that life, no matter how fragile, no matter how forbidden by law, was worth fighting for. And in that moment, the galaxy was not punishment. It was possibility. They had survived the laws, survived the hunters, survived the cruelty of a galaxy that demanded control. And now, together, they would live freely, a human soldier, an alien dragon mother, and the child born out of season. Their story was no longer one of exile and fear. It was a story of courage, bond, and hope.